model's approach to unified endpoint management. This is a series that we've been going through for a little while now. This particular presentation is on configuration management level 5. My name is Jason Rutherford, and I am the managing partner of Model Technology Solutions. In this, we'll go through just a brief agenda. We'll talk about what unified endpoint management means, the review of the maturity model phases and their categories, and then configuration management level 5 overview specifically. So the maturity model itself. So this is a process we developed using stages or phases from initial to efficient to define endpoint management characteristics. And we'll get into the categories of those characteristics here momentarily. But in the initial phase, you're starting to recognize that you have a need. In a repeatable phase, you're doing things the same over and over again. In a defined phase, you've got robust definitions on how things are being done. In a managed phase, you're in a state to where endpoints are controlled. And then in an efficient stage, you're using analytics to really drive those capabilities. So unified endpoint management categories. These are the categories that we came up with to really assess and define where you're at today and where you are going in endpoint management. So management infrastructure, configuration management, which is what we'll talk about today, updates and servicing, application management, and endpoint security. If you haven't done so already, go check out our previous videos that we've created in the various categories to get a better understanding of what they mean. So an example output. Here's an example output of after an assessment that we have conducted in your organization on endpoint management, what you would receive. You would get a category by category breakdown of what maturity level you fall into based on data points that we gather. The output is a findings and recommendations report, which can facilitate next steps to drilling specific areas down to a more mature category. The findings and recommendations report can facilitate the next steps to maturing any one of these categories. So configuration management level 5, what is it? Well, when you're in a level 5 of configuration management, you have a robust and well-defined, potentially even automated, more automated than manual for sure, provisioning processes. Your endpoint configuration is thoroughly defined, and we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. You're managing drift of configuration. So once you put a machine out on the floor, it is maintaining its security posture and configuration posture that you'd put together. You have robust self-service capabilities. And you have a well-defined and potentially automated deprovisioning processes or set of processes. So let's dive into the provisioning processes. Whether you have machines on-prem, in the cloud, or you're repurposing a machine, this could be a variety of processes. In organizations that maybe aren't as mature in this category, they are building machines by hand, potentially even buying them from different vendors, building them by hand, and then handing out the devices. And depending on when you got your device, might depend on what apps you have installed or what configuration you have installed. Now that's kind of at the lowest base level of the provisioning process. In a very mature organization, you're in a cloud world, maybe you're autopiloting and presenting a lot of optional applications to the end user for consumption. Although many of your applications might be SaaS-based, there might be some that need to be installed. Those are installed within, let's say, an hour of the user logging in, if not prior to the end of autopilot being provisioned. In an on-prem environment, maybe you're able to have a interface like our Dynamic Deployment Interface, or DDI, which is a tool that we created that replaces the UDI, the User-Driven Installation Wizard, to provide a robust set of applications and standards configuration sets for devices. So let's say you're a user in a marketing department. You want a machine that has all of your marketing tools installed or associated, or the machine has whatever permissions it needs to do the things that it needs to do for your marketing function, right? And in a reprovisioning process, the idea would be true to either reset the machine and let it autopilot, or re-image the machine in the case of a on-prem environment, and you're based on your configuration profile that you've chosen, configures the machine as intended. To get to that point, you have to have your configuration defined potentially by role. And so in the graphic that we have here on the screen, you have a variety of different types of people or resources or personas, avatars that are in your environment. Those people potentially need different applications, potentially different machine types to do their job effectively. And so unless you know the environment that machines need to be applied to, it's very difficult to reduce end user frustration once they receive a machine unless this is well defined. So in a level 5, you know that project management people get Microsoft Project and they might get Power BI. Whereas in the financial management infrastructure, maybe they get access to the ERP system and Power BI. And so this kind of configuration definition, we've long said that is basically a role-based configuration. And the simpler you can make the roles, the better. The larger your organization is, potentially there's more complexities. But I've certainly been in a number of small organizations where there's a number of complexities to the role definition as well. The basics are learn what users need and provide a configuration that enables productivity. Managing drift. Once the initial provisioning process is completed or a setting has been deployed through some mechanism in your environment, that setting is applied at a snapshot in time. During the provisioning process, potentially during an update, during a refresh, during a login. So there's many ways to provide these settings. However, reapplying and validating that these settings need to be reapplied, and if they're not applied, to reapply them, is the only way to ensure a very consistent operating environment. Now, oftentimes what we'll hear is we want to provide the initial configuration and then let users change it from that point forward. And that is certainly an acceptable way to go, but there are still things within the constraints of the operating environment that you want to be able to control that you wouldn't want users to necessarily control. You might give them options within those controls, but there's still an overarching control set that should be managed from your IT department. And then self-service, another portion of the level 5 in configuration management, is providing a robust set of self-service capabilities to your end users, whether they're applications for installation, whether you're a cloud only or an on-prem environment. It's updating the operating system from both a security patch perspective or an operating system perspective to the next version of the operating system. Requests for non-sanctioned apps is another great self-service capability. And then password resets. So in the grand scheme of endpoints, the idea is to give and empower users to the best of your ability all of the options that are within their realm of requests. Anything that they can call for, you want to try to minimize that so that they are able to be as efficient as they can during their working hours. And finally, we have a deprovisioning. What we see so many times from the deprovisioning process is, hey, go ahead and hand your machine to Jim over there and he'll take care of it. And Jim might run a DoD wipe, he might not, he might let it sit, he might just re-image it for somebody else. But what you see is without a good lifecycle management from provisioning to deprovisioning, you can create instances in your environment that were never certainly intended. Things like data leaks, breaches can occur, an inaccurate inventory can happen without a deprovisioning process. And then lifecycle management. What I mean by that is, let's say somebody hands in a machine because they are leaving the organization, and we just re-image that because that's what we do and hand it to somebody else, or we autopilot to hand it to somebody else. Ensuring that the deprovisioning process takes into account the age of the device and the usability of the device when the device is getting retired are all elements that need to go into this deprovisioning process that many of us take for granted as we'll just retire the machine, or yeah, we'll just reprovision the machine. There's a lot of things that can go into a discovery to ensure that you're doing a service and not doing a disservice to the organization. So next steps. So out of this, we would conduct an assessment in your environment. The time commitment is 2 90-minute sessions. The first 90-minute session is going over a set of questions and diving in a lot deeper that we would send you ahead of time so that we understand kind of how your environment operates. And the second 90 minutes is once we process that information, we'll give you the maturity model score and immediate next steps in each category to mature your environment. The cost for the program is $3,000. And if you're interested, you can reach me at jason.rutherford@model-technology.com. Check out our website at model-technology.com.